Now in this chapter we'll look at some of the issues surrounding international visitors. Now the first thing to bear in mind is there are different versions of Google for different countries. If you're in the United States and just type in google.com, the google.com version obviously will come up. However, if you're in, say, the UK and type in google.com, what you'll actually get is the local version, which is google.co.uk. Similarly, in Australia, you type in google.com and what you'll probably get is google.com.au. And it's important to realize that local different variations of Google will produce different results depending what you type in. Now, if you're interested in international business, you really need to try and find out how well you're doing in the local versions of Google around the world, depending on where your target markets are. So one solution is to use a VPN, a virtual private network. And this is just a piece of software that says to Google, hey, I'm in Australia, or I'm in the UK, or I'm in Ireland, or wherever you want to be. And it's a way of programs like Google into thinking, as I say, you're in a different country than you actually are. So international spellings, that's one thing you have to think about. So in the United States, a lot of words will have a slightly different spelling, and also you can of course have different words completely for the same things. One possible solution is to set up multiple websites for different areas. So for instance, you could have one website for, say, North America, one website for Europe, and say another website for Australia, or whatever region you're interested in. And it's just a way of separating things out, customizing things to a local market. So as I say, in North America, the word organize would have a Z in it, whereas in the UK, it might be spelt with an S. And so there's lots of words like that are slightly different. As well as different spellings, words can have different meanings. I originally came to Australia about 12 years ago, and I remember being quite startled when I wandered into a bar, and there was a big sign saying, "No thongs." It took me a while to catch on that in Australia, a thong is basically like a sandal. It's an item of footwear. So as you can see from the picture here, actually taken from Google, when you type in the word thong in Australia, to put it mildly, you get slightly mixed results. Paper size, that's something else you've got to consider. If you're making downloadable documents available, or ebooks, something like that, again, in the United States, they'll be using what's called letter size. Say the UK, Australia, Ireland, they use what's called A4 size. One other thing you might like to consider if you're going for international business, try and dictate the terms and conditions of use of your website, and also try and establish jurisdiction for any legal disputes. So it will obviously depend on the country you're in, and you need to take proper legal advice on this. At the very least, what you might want to do is put something on your website that may or may not be legally enforceable, but something along the lines of, terms and conditions of this website imply that you abide by the local jurisdiction in case of disputes. So in my case, I'm based in the state of Western Australia, in Australia. So generally I have something in the terms and condition that says, if you want to dispute things legally, then you have to do it locally here within Perth, within Australia. Whether that's legally binding for some countries is an interesting question and way beyond the scope of this course. So for things like that, you do need to take proper legal advice. In the same way, things like sales tax, again, you need to take proper financial advice. Certainly the EU would take the view that if you sell something in Australia to an EU citizen, then in many cases you should pay what's called VAT, value added tax. So as I say, this will vary from one service to another, from one jurisdiction to another. So again, just take proper advice on this. Phone numbers is another thing you've got to think about. Even within Australia, just the one country, there's different area codes for different states. So you need to specify the full number on your website. One way around this is to use a mobile number, which sort of works right across Australia. Then there's other things you need to think about, like maybe a toll-free or a free phone number. If that wasn't bad enough, let's say you are based in Australia like me, and you're trying to attract American business, then you have to supply the full dialing code for people to dial from America. and that can vary from provider to provider within America. So it's, as far as I can see, impossible for me to give an exact number that any American can dial from any state in the United States and actually dial and get me at the other end. The other obvious thing about international business is if you're working 9 to 5 in your country or your state, then of course other countries, will be trying to ring you once you've closed, or possibly before you actually open in the morning. So there's all of these sort of things you've got to think about. So again, just try and make it clear that which country you're in, and if people want to, maybe they should be better off sending you an email rather than trying to phone you. That said, there are ways around this. I mean, you can use a local 24-hour answering service based in your country, or indeed, let's say you're interested in business in America and you're based in Australia. There's nothing wrong with using an answering service in America. That has the advantage that the dialing codes will sound the same, the noise when you actually connect. And it also means that when people answer the phone on your behalf, it's going to be, the American accent as opposed to an Australian or an English accent. If you want to, you can actually combine some of these ideas, so there's nothing wrong with actually acquiring a toll-free number, say in the United States, and then routing that through to a 24-hour answering service in Australia. I mean, that will work, and it's one way of dealing with the time differences. Again, if you're thinking about international business, you've got to think about accepting different currencies and also making it clear which currency you're selling in. So again, as I've said many times, I'm based in Australia, so if I'm dealing with customers in the United States, I have to make it very, very clear to them that any prices that I quote will be in Australian dollars. One solution that I found that works well is to literally just have different websites for different regions or different countries. That way, everything on it can be customized to the local region. Is it winter or is it summer? It always amazes me the lack of thought that goes into promotions by some of these large multinationals. As I said, I live in Australia and I regularly get summer offers or winter offers from companies based in America, and it doesn't seem to occur to them that it might well be summer in, say, New York, but that means it's going to be in the middle of winter down here in Australia. So, it's just a small thing, but again, it would be nice if people thought about their target market a little bit more. The other thing to bear in mind is that people have different holidays, maybe different weekends, for historical, religious reasons. So, for instance, say in Australia, generally Saturday and Sunday is regarded the weekend, whereas other traditions, either Jewish or Arabic, might well have a slightly different weekend as such. The same thing applies to formerly religious holidays. So, for instance, Christmas holidays are generally sort of observed by Western countries, whereas in Arab countries or Jewish countries, again, you'll have slightly different religious-based holidays. One little trick that I've used quite often on websites is to actually display a little clock showing you the local time. So when people go to my contact page, depending on which website they're talking about, but if they want to contact me from abroad and they see that the local time is, sort of 12 o'clock at night, then they suddenly think, no point in ringing, at which point they'll send me an email instead. Even here in Australia, sometimes the difference from coast to coast can be a 3-hour difference. So again, it's just useful because I'm based in Perth, which is in Western Australia. I don't really want people ringing me up at 6 o'clock in the morning my time, because it happens to be 9 o'clock in Sydney. So there is a well-known website, it's just called timeanddate.com, and from there you can basically go to the website there. You can go and set up a little clock. It can be analog or digital. It can be 24-hour or 12-hour clock, depends what you want. You don't need to register, you just simply click here, continue through the instructions, and they'll give you the code. And as I say, you just display that on your contact us page or something like that.